So we've somehow reached the end of March, and what a crazy month it was. Today we're talking the best and worst of the month, Movies Edition. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. I was able to see 13 original movies in the month of March, and today I'm counting them down, telling you which movies I believe are worth a watch, which ones aren't worth a watch, and I need you guys in the comments. Please let me know, are there some films that I missed? I know there are. It was a busy month, and how would you rank the ones that I talked about? We're going to get into it, and of course, the best way to tell me you like this video is by dropping that thumbs up. The algorithm appreciates it. Hey, The Lost City. This is the film that I just talked about on my channel, and I was looking forward to it, right? Sandra Bullock, Channing Tatum, you have Harry Potter as a villain? What? Daniel Radcliffe? He was a character that I was a bit iffy about at first, but then you learn who he actually is, and he ended up working, and the cast as a whole is the reason why this movie worked. Am I going to sit back and say it's the funniest comedy I've seen in the last couple of years? Absolutely not. There were a couple of jokes that just didn't really work, even with Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock doing the delivery. What worked about this film way more so is the chemistry between the two leads, and that chemistry turns all of their moments into something that's at least worth watching. Even if the scene wasn't all that funny, I'm still loving what they're bringing. And then you have the scenes that were funny, and Brad Pitt's inclusion. I wish he was in the movie just a bit more. When the film is turning into this, Indiana Jones-like Uncharted adventure, that's when I was less enthused. I was much more so enthused when they're on the run and they're going back and forth with the slapsticky type humor. That made it feel like that early 2000s rom-com that sometimes is a bit refreshing. So overall, I had an okay experience with this film, and that's why I'm putting it on the okay tier. Love the cast. Next up, Deep Water. This is a movie that's deep in my rankings, and not in a good way. It's really far down. I wanted this to be so much better than it actually was. It has its defenders, though, man. I saw some people there in my comments like, Austin, you didn't understand the mastery of Deep Water. And I'm like, nope. No, I didn't. And that's the crazy thing. Ben Affleck is actually really good in the movie. Ana de Armas, her character is, it's just one of those characters, very unlikable. Actually, both of them are, but I don't need to like every character in a movie to appreciate the movie. There are countless examples where the filmmaking and the script and just the vibe of the film works, and that's what you're invested in. That's what you're rooting for. With Deepwater, it just feels like a lazy story that's being told. It feels like a story that's trying to build up to something that never quite culminates, and all throughout the film, they are planting these seeds that are attempting to be so subtle, but at a point in the movie, they just reveal everything. They spill the beans, and while I respect the guts to make that decision, it's a decision that did not serve the movie in the least bit. What was already difficult to gravitate towards with this story, they just kind of said, screw it. We're just going to tell you everything that we were building up to, and that's a very lazy decision. And then the way everything comes together in the third act, I'm like, this is not... It's just not a very well-made movie. It's not very well put together. And while I wanted it to be on the awesome tier, unfortunately, Deepwater's going on the bad tier. A great cast, but numerous missed opportunities. Ben Affleck, though, he's really good. Jason Segel, Lily Collins, Jesse Plemons, Windfall on Netflix. I was really looking forward to this, even though I did forget to request a screener. But I got up early, I watched it that morning, and I said to myself, this is not what I expected it to be. Now, sometimes that's a good thing. But in this film's case, it wasn't quite as intense as I personally believe it needed to be to keep my attention all throughout the film. Is there interesting dialogue? Yes. Are the character dynamics fascinating? Absolutely. And there's a lot to respect about this film. In the summary, it says it's attempting to be a Hitchcockian type film, a Hitchcockian type thriller. And you do get those vibes from the score to some of the performances to the relationship between Collins and Segel, how that escalates, culminates, and the responses from Jesse Plemons all throughout the movie. For me, they try to do something in the third act that didn't quite work. It didn't drive the point home that they were going for, and that was unfortunate. So really disappointed with the way it played out, really disappointed with certain elements in the third act. But there's still a lot to respect and appreciate here, and some of the dialogue was actually really compelling. All in all, I think this is a Netflix movie that goes on the meh tier. Just didn't quite come together for me. After Yang, a lot of people didn't see this film. It came out on Showtime kind of quietly, didn't do a lot in theaters, but I was able to see this all the way back at Sundance. It released officially in the month of March, so we're going to talk about it. I found a lot to love about this movie. It's slow. The pacing is definitely not something that's going to keep everyone invested that watches it. That's the common complaint that I'm seeing on something like an IMDb. But it's such a beautiful story dealing with human emotions. Even though it's centered around something or someone that is not human, it is all about humanity and feeling what these characters are able to feel at the center of this film is something that transferred so well to me as a viewer. In the near future, a family reckons with questions of love, connection, and loss after their AI helper unexpectedly breaks down. And from there, we explore a series of memories from this AI that we are able to see, that our characters are able to see and feel and respond to in such a way that explores both the beauties and the moments that aren't quite as beautiful. And Kogonada, our director, explores this in such an A24 way. And that's why I believe there's a little bit of a back and forth on whether or not this movie is as good. A lot of people, would put it on even a higher tier than me. I'm going to go ahead and throw it on the great tier. I think there are a lot of great elements. I do need to see it again because the big issue for me is that pacing. But overall, I found it to be a beautiful film. Cheaper by the dozen. Yeah, there were so many things about this film that I was having issues with as we were going. And I'm talking purely from a writing standpoint, like character decisions, the way that characters react to things that happen in their life, the way they just shake things off and move on. And we start to, bring up very important themes and storylines that we're hitting on, and then they just go away in this movie. And we go back to, well, not the kids, right? It's cheaper by the dozen. You want to focus on the kids. It goes back to the adults. And I'm like, I don't care about the adults. We're here. It's a family movie. It's a movie that should be centered around the kids. Now, when we get those moments and the kids in this movie, it's a very clear target audience, right? It's obviously shooting for families and families with younger children who don't really care as much about certain storylines, but they're in it for the slight entertainment, the exposition dump at the beginning. And I think it works from that standpoint. I think they are kind of hitting that target audience, which is why I wasn't as harsh in my review. Did I enjoy watching it? No, not at all. But it's one that I didn't hate as much as I expected to hate it. Holding the early 2000s Cheaper by the Dozen so close to my heart. And because of that, I'm putting it on the meh tier, but it does get close to bad. Daisy Edgar Jones, Sebastian Stan. This is a film that I saw all the way back at Sundance, but it finally came out in March. And someone asked me, Austin, is this a movie that I can watch right after I eat? And I said, nope. Unless you think you can handle it, but nope. It's crazy because things like that don't get me queasy, but you take a needle to an arm, and I just pass out in an elevator. True story. Here's what you need to know about Fresh on Hulu. It's really interesting and intense, and honestly, even before we get to that point, I was invested in this slight romance at the beginning between these two characters. I thought it was interesting. I like the buildup. I like her character's mentality, how she feels about love, and it's just becoming one thing, and he's like, you know what? I'm a cool dude. I'm a rich dude. We met at a grocery store. Let me take you out to my random house on a hill with no signal. So that probably should have been a red flag, but man, he knows how to weasel his way in there. I won't go any further with the plot, just in case you haven't seen it. But Fresh is one of those movies that is so fascinating throughout. Now, I will say, it did slow down a bit in the middle of the movie, and I'm not entirely sure if the decision-making from the characters worked for me in the third act. In the movies, and I've said it 1,000 times, they go back somewhere where they should have went back to, or they make a decision. I'm like, what in the world are you doing? There's a little bit of that in the third act, so I was a bit bummed out. But overall, I had a good experience. I think this is one of the better films I saw at Sundance, and I'm going to throw it on the good tier. It's something. All right, a couple movies on here that I didn't review on the channel, one being After Yang, the next one being The Outfit, that I was just too busy for opening weekend, but I finally saw it in preparation. It was the one movie I wanted to see in preparation for this video, and you know what? I actually really dug this movie, and the more I've been able to think about it over the last day or two, the more I'm sitting here going, I think this is a great film. This is going to go down as one of the biggest hidden gems, and it's partially my fault because I didn't even review it, of 2022. And that's really cool. Now, I believe you're going to be able to find it in theaters, but it didn't do all that hot opening weekend. Seek this one out because it's surprising from start to finish. Most of this, though, has to do with the performance from Mark Rylance. The cast as a whole is really good. Johnny Flynn, Zoe Dutch, Dylan O'Brien, but it is Mark Rylance's movie, and the subtleties from his character that slowly come back around at the end of the film, the way it all plays out, the intensity within the mystery, and just how this movie was crafted, man. Graham Moore, the director, I want to apologize for missing this opening weekend and not being able to talk about it. It's a really good movie. It's not flashy. It's not big. You can tell there's a smaller budget, but there's a lot to this that I feel like people are going to seek and find and inevitably still be talking about it at the end of the year. Is it perfect? No. Are a couple of the reveals obvious? Yes. And I'm not entirely sure if the pacing's for everyone, but that's not even an issue because it moves as fluid as any other great movie I've seen this year. Spoilers, I'm putting this on the great tier. I really dug the outfit and almost everything about it. We're going to keep that hot streak going. We're going from the outfit to X, another movie that I responded to, and a lot of it has to do with the filmmaking. My goodness. X is so meticulously crafted from a cinematography standpoint. The look, the production design, the feel, it captures that time period so well. But can we sit back and appreciate Mia Goth as this lead character of sorts? The whole cast is great. Martin Henderson, Kid Cudi, Jenna Ortega. Jenna Ortega, by the way, who is sitting, I believe, in 3 movies that are currently in my top 10 of the year. What a year she's having. She's great in the film. It is a horror slasher thriller, but like I said in my original tweet, I got more thrills than actual scares. I wasn't really spooked by anything throughout the movie other than the imagery, right? So instead of getting those jump scares, I'm just sitting there feeling really uncomfortable, and those are the thrills and chills that you want from a movie like this sometimes. And uncomfortable is the word, because maybe it was too uncomfortable at points, and maybe I didn't fully respond to the story like the filmmaker wanted me to, but overall, it was effective. I believe it accomplished what it tried to do, and I'm going to throw it on the great tier. This is a fascinating film from A24, and unlike anything you're going to see. Noomi Rapace, I've always struggled saying her last name. I don't know why. Maybe it's the Kentucky. I mean, I want to say Noomi Rapace. That came out weird. Black Crab is an interesting international thriller. It was one that I was really looking forward to because I saw the trailer and I responded to the imagery, and that's what stays consistent throughout the movie. It's a beautiful film to look at, especially when we're going out on the ice and they're literally skating from one location to the other in the midst of this war going on around them. They're infiltrating. Essentially, it's a one-way mission, right? Because they know there's not too good of a chance that they're going to return. But she has a very a personal reason for being there in the first place, even though she's kind of forced to be there. Regardless, that's kind of the crux of our story. And to see this play out was interesting enough, but my big issue with this movie is I was left with so many freaking questions. And back to my review, the comments were like, Austin, you don't have to have all the answers to enjoy the movie. Well, no, but you have to have something. And to not get really anything that made everything come together and feel cohesive, but to also not get a lot of enjoyment from the dialogue-filled scenes. I mean, I thought the dialogue was very questionable in this film, from exposition to just an overall lack of enthusiasm from some of the supporting actors. Now, Noomi is amazing. She's always amazing. You can consistently praise her, but everyone around her, for the most part, was either or not very good, so that made for less of an experience than I was getting from the visual side of things, and that's why I'm going to put Black Crab on the meh tier. The Adam Project. Listen, I understand I'm in the minority with how much I enjoyed this movie. That's fine, whatever. I just thought it was super entertaining. Flight of the Navigator, and it's funny because I just watched Flight of the Navigator, and then I watched this movie, and then I started thinking about all those 80s Spielberg classics that have some of the same issues that this film has, right? bit of a lackluster villain. I think there's certain elements of that story that could have been tightened or corrected. And then every now and then we'll go off into a subplot or storyline that's not as interesting as our main storyline between our two versions of Adam, younger Adam and older Adam, of course, played by Ryan Reynolds. The Ryan Reynolds isms are there. Some people are sick of the shtick. I'm not. I enjoyed that. And I thought this movie was a heartfelt, action-packed good time. The action was fun. Nothing wrong with that. But when they started to move away from the emotion within this character of Adam and that family storyline, that's when I wasn't as intrigued or on board. There's also just a bigger world here that I think was worth exploring, but understandably so, they decided to keep the story much more subtle, much more focused, and I appreciate that. Is everyone going to agree with me on this? No, but again, it's my list. I don't care. We're putting this on the great tier. I really enjoyed the Adam Project. I did. Y'all, the controversy was real with this movie, man. It was so real. And I got on Twitter and then I just logged out, took my phone, threw it into a river, and moved away from here. Nah, that's not true. I'm still here. There's just so much back and forth on this movie. Here's my thoughts, and here's why, I didn't love it on the level of other Pixar films. I'll be transparent with you, but I still found enough to enjoy and get a lot out of when it comes to, especially when it comes to the second half of this film and exploring the lore and allowing these girls to, whether it be learn their lessons or come together. I also really just appreciated the early 2000s nostalgia in this movie, whether it be like the boy bands or some of those Pixar isms, the subtleties that shine through so well within the script, and then the craft of Turning Red, right? The cooking scenes, the anime influences, the style, the beautiful visuals, man. All of that is present in this movie. Well, Austin, what did you not respond to? My issues almost solely come down to the rampant pacing of especially the first 25 minutes of this movie. It's so fast-paced. Our characters, they're just moving in a way that I couldn't quite. It's like it was trying to be the Lego movie with its humor, with its style, with that slapstickiness, and it wasn't quite working for me. It felt like there was a tonal imbalance because then when we get really emotional later on in the film, but sometimes those emotions, they're pulled back on because that injection of humor would try to come in, and I just didn't feel the right balance, especially in the first little bit of the movie. I also felt the relationship between this little girl and her mother, and you understand why at the end of the film her mother was so protective, but it's almost too overwhelming at the beginning to the point to where I was getting frustrated for this little girl. I'm like, this is too much for Mom. You gotta chill out, Mom, all right? You're killing her, you're killing me. And they explain that later in the film, but for some reason, I just still couldn't go back to that first 30 minutes and say, yeah, I enjoyed it, because honestly, I wasn't really digging. I do think there are so many elements here that make me want to put it on this tier ever so slightly. It's just hard when you're comparing it to other Pixar films and the subtleties that they were able to bring into their movies. I'm going to throw this on the good tier. I am very interested to see what this director brings us next. Next up, I won't spend too much time on this, but I rewatched Drive My Car. I originally watched it to vote for the Critics' Choice Awards like in November, but it did drop on HBO Max in March, and I just talked about it in my Best Pictures ranked video. All I will say is Drive My Car. It took me just a bit to fully appreciate what this movie was trying to do, and I said this in my other video. Anytime you have a movie that takes 40 minutes just to do its introduction, you know you're in for something so different. That's what Drive My Car is, but I am so appreciative of the style and the technical elements behind this film and the construction of the story dealing with pure emotions and trying your best to comprehend and work your way through losing someone, to grasp the reality of that situation. But it all comes down to the dialogue from this film. How does that affect you, right? If it doesn't hit you and stick with you, then you're going to focus more on the pacing of this movie. And that's where my issues come in, is even the second time around, I struggled through that 3-hour runtime just because there are so many things that you have to be so locked in and focused on. Now, is that on me? Or is that on the movie? That's why I didn't review it after the first time watching it. I said, I want to give this a fair shake. After watching it again, I can say I appreciate it more. I'm still not in the camp of thinking it is clearly a top 10 movie from last year, but I do think this is a movie that deserves to be on my great tier. Drive My Car got nominated for Best Picture for a reason, and I think it's such a beautifully constructed movie, and I just appreciate it so much. Wait a second. Hold. We've still got the Moon Knight set. It is The Batman, a movie in which I loved and have seen 3 times. I want to go see it one more time, though, before it leaves theaters. Oh, boy, we're almost in April. I need to do that. Regardless, listen, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I have defended it ever since it first came out. It's gotten better every time I've seen it. Maybe not the experience, but just the overall arc of Bruce Wayne. And the more I've thought about the movie, the more I've come to terms with certain things about Bruce's arc and not fully coming into the Bruce Wayne that we know until the end of the film, in which I believe is going to lead us into a second movie where we're going to see more of that philanthropist, billionaire type of Bruce Wayne, because he doesn't fully embrace the fact that he needs to be a symbol of hope until the end of the movie. Do I want to spoil it that much in this video? Not necessarily, but there are just so many things that I pick up on every time I see the movie, but my score has remained the same because I loved it so much that first time. It's hard to really go up from there in terms of quality. I've just been able to appreciate a lot of the elements much more so. I love the film. It's going to be so hard to top this movie when we reach the end of 2022. Now, there are some films I think can do it, absolutely. But I just love this character so much. I always have. I always will. He's one of my favorite characters in general of all time, and that's just me solely talking about the comic books. When you talk about the on-screen versions, he may be my favorite character of all time. So to do it again, they're doing the Batman again. How are they going to make it feel fresh and different? Well, the answer is Matt Reeves. The answer is just the construction of this version of Bruce Wayne and the Batman. Then you have the cast, everyone from Colin Farrell to Paul Dano, and then of course, the man himself, Robert Pattinson, that relationship, the chemistry with Zoe Kravitz, the best Commissioner Gordon we've ever seen in terms of his dynamic with Batman. I could rave about this all day. I have a hard time faulting the film. The only big complaint is the pacing, and that didn't even really bother me. It didn't. So, lack of Alfred, why am I reviewing this? I'm putting it on a tier. It goes on the awesome tier. I've made my decision. Okay, we reached the end. You know what that means? It is time to rank these films. First off, if you are here right now and you're liking what you're seeing, be sure to hit the thumbs up and leave them comments down below. That was bad grammar. At the bottom, Deep Water is deep on this list. Did I make that pun already? I think I did. On the meh tier, Cheaper by the Dozen is cheaper than these 2 movies, followed by Black Crab, and at the top of the meh tier is Windfall. The first movie on this list that I at least appreciate is The Lost City. It was a fun romantic comedy. I'm pretty sure my mom would love it. On the good tier, but definitely much further down than Fresh, is Turning Red, followed by Fresh. We move into the great tier, and we're actually ranking a great batch of films, but I do have to put The Adam Project at the bottom. It's closer to good. Out of this next batch, I'm actually going to go after Yang, behind Drive My Car, and oh boy, this is tough, but I may have to put The Outfit above Drive My Car. People are going to hate that. They're going to hate that decision, because I know how beloved Drive My Car is. It's just the fact that I was so surprised by The Outfit and the way that it impacted me, I have to put it in that 3 spot, followed by A24's X, a horror movie that I just responded to in a way unlike any other, and then The Batman at the top of this list on the awesome tier. I look at this tier list and I say it was actually a really good month for movies. Now, clearly, we have 4 that I wasn't as high on, and that's okay. But I'm curious to see what April brings us. I'm about to see Morbius. This weekend, I'm seeing Sonic. Are these going to be 2 movies that are worth it at the end of the day? We also have some really cool things dropping on Netflix. Be on the lookout. This isn't the only one of these that I do. My TV show tier list is coming later on in the week, where I rank all the TV shows that I saw. This is such a fun series. I appreciate all of your interactions, helping out the channel, man. It means the absolute world to me, and everything you guys did for me in March. It was fantastic. Appreciate you big time for watching. Thanks so much again. You guys are the best, and I'll be seeing you soon.